The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett.
Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody wants that eternal kiss. Yeah, everyone's saying there's more than this. Everyone wants to follow their own bliss. Talking about one love, one blood, one life in everyone. One life, give each other. We are sisters and brothers. We sing
On the Expansion Zone, we examine life and our quest to understand who and what we are and of the vastness of human potentials. We explore the making of our world from quantum physics to parapsychology, health, sociology, and philosophy, along with practical living. You are reminded of the possibilities in creating personal change. So for an hour, we'll stimulate and expand the mind.
shanty, 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 shanty. Sing the world, let's do it together. Shanty, shanty, shanty. It's time to wake up. Shanty, shanty, to a brighter day. Realize that.
Well, welcome to another edition of The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. Of course, that's me. And I am so delighted, as always, to be here. I'm delighted that you're watching. And pretty much all the guests that I have on, of course, I have them on because I want to hear what they have to say. But today's guest, I'm truly excited to chat with. So you're in for a real treat. So as always, I do like to read a couple of quotes right before. And today I have some quotes that are extremely relevant to the topic today. And let's see, the first quote is, man must rise above the earth to the top of the atmosphere and beyond, for only thus will he fully understand the world in which he lives. And that's Socrates. And the second one is, astronomy compels the soul to look upward and leads us from this world to another. That's Plato. All right, so I always have a couple things to say about the quote. But first, today's topic is going to be how to hack the stars and of reading light as a way to decode this cosmic environment. It's going to be more than that, but we have to give you a topic, right? And my guest today, and I'm going to do the best I can in pronouncing his name, Hakeem Oluseyi. He is an American astrophysicist, cosmologist, inventor, educator, science communicator, author, and so much more. So real quickly regarding the quote, and I won't read them again, but I just want to say that these quotes, I think they speak for themselves and fully express the necessity of curiosity and of our willingness to explore with an open mind. We must step beyond our illusionary boxes, because really that's basically what they are. It's, we have these boxes. That's all made up, and then we get fixed, and then we get stuck in there. So I think those quotes remind us that there is so much more that's untapped, and we are ever really barely scratching the surface to understanding this idea of reality and ourselves, and of course our place in all of this in the bigger picture. So I'll read a little bit of his bio, because there's so much here, but I'm going to try to condense it. Hakeem Oluseyi, astrophysicist, cosmologist, inventor, educator, science communicator, author, actor, and humanitarian. Since 2007, he has been a professor of physics and space science at the Florida Institute of Technology. His academic rank is Distinguished Research Professor. He is temporarily stationed at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., where he is the Space Sciences Education Manager for NASA's Science Mission Directorate via the Intergovernmental Personal Act Mobility Program. His best known scientific contributions, are research on the transfer of mass and energy through the sun's atmosphere, the development of space-borne observatories for studying astrophysical plasmas and dark energy, and the development of transformative technologies in ultraviolet optics, detectors, computer chips, and ion propulsion. I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to share the rest of this because this is just so exciting. He appears as a communicator and scientific authority in Science Channel television shows, including How the Universe Works, Outrageous Acts of Science, NASA's Unexplained Files, Space's Deepest Secrets, and Stripe the Cosmos. He lent his voice and scientific expertise to the award-winning science education video game X-Trex. And also, he co-authored the children's popular science book, Discovery Spaceopedia, the complete guide to everything space. Anyway, so I'm going to welcome him, but at the same time, I'm going to say to him, when you have a moment, Hakeem, would you send me a proper bio, please? One that shows that you are actually doing something with your life. Anyway, welcome to the expansion zone.
Thank you. I have to thank you so much for that introduction. I have to update things though. I am no longer at Florida Tech and NASA.
Okay.
Yes. So that's a year and a half old bio. I left as of July 31st, 2019. So everything I say is as Hakeem Oluseyi, the citizen. So I am affiliated now with George Mason University.
Got it. All right. Good to know. I figured you would update us on what's going on, because a lot of times, the bio is not necessarily quite accurate. And when you're busy, when you're busy, it's hard to keep up with, let's make sure it's changed here and there and, everywhere. So
yeah, absolutely. So as far as announcements go, I have a memoir coming out June 15th titled A Quantum Life, My Unlikely Journey from the Streets to the Stars.
I love it. That's going to be really an exciting read, and I think exciting in a lot of ways it's motivating for one. But, I think, where can we begin this conversation? I'm going to probably just kind of start up by saying, when did you really become so deeply curious about the stars? Is there any one memorable moment where the spark was there? And we're going to lead into other things, but I think that's my curiosity. There's always that one moment, of going, yes, I want to go there.
Yeah. So for me, in a way, there were two moments that I recall. The first moment was I just was born curious about the natural world. So I can recall being too young to read, and my aunt had World Book encyclopedias, and they were all black and white, but then there were those color pages, right? And I would just stare at the pictures of the snakes, and I still have the memory in my mind because they were all colors and colorful, right? And then there was television. There was Jacques Cousteau, and there was Wild Kingdom. And I was just like really into this stuff. And what happened is, I went from being an urban kid to moving to the country. So if you're into animals, you go into the country. I was living on a farm with, all sorts of fowl, cows, pigs. And then, we hunted, squirrels, raccoons, possums, armadillos, which I didn't learn until recently could give you leprosy, but I've eaten a lot of armadillos in my youth, and handled them, cleaning them. Yeah. So luckily, most of humanity is immune to leprosy. So we got lucky. But the natural world is what brought me in. The world of physics occurred when I moved out of the country back into an urban environment, and I was left alone. And I had just discovered books. I was 10 years old, right? I just discovered that reading books was really cool. And I decided that I was going to read our World Book encyclopedias. And I discovered Albert Einstein and the world of, you know, physics, weirdness, and what appears to be magic. And for my mind, that was just like the greatest thing ever because, you know, I loved everything of that ilk, right? I love Greek gods and mythology. I love the Bible stories. I love the Marvel and DC comics. So now here it is, a scientist is coming up with, you know, actual real time travel type things, right? So that was a big moment for me that just, you know, boom, 10 years old right there. The universe is what I'm interested in.
Wow. I mean, I think it's fascinating because as we've talked, I can relate. The only difference is I had no idea that I loved science as much as I've discovered in the last, I would say, 10 years or so. I wanted to dance and sing. I wanted to be on Broadway,
Yeah.
right? So, but I understand that curiosity is what has driven you to where you are at this time. So, you know, you've got some specific areas that you are focused on. And I think when it comes to the stars, I'm going to let you lead on that in terms of where you are right now in that research and what people should really know. What are some things that people should really begin to understand about all that you've discovered in terms of our cosmos?
Yeah. So, you know, the first thing is I'm a human being just like you are, right? I have bills to pay. And when you are approaching being a scientist, you have to take some practical considerations into consideration. So I can have some pie in the sky, great scientific ideas that I can't get funding for, which means that I'm not going to be able to eat, right? Or live indoors. And the way it works as a scientist, especially when you're a faculty member, is that you are responsible for bringing in a portion of your salary. And so it works out for me to be about a third of my salary through your research grants. And so you have to compete competitively. So there's two things. There are, you know, what is it that your colleagues say, yes, we accept you as an expert in this field, and we'll give you money here. And then what are the problems you're really thinking about that really interest you, right? Those are two different things. And so for me, the things that interest me, you know, I try to think about the nature of the universe at the most fundamental level. And so the type of science that people do that think that way are, you know, there's three main areas, right? There's what's called black hole thermodynamics. There is what's called string theory. And there's another approach. I forget the name of it, but the idea here is what is the nature of space itself? You know, and what is the universe really doing? What is it up to on a grand scheme? Let me give you a real world example. So when we talk about the universe, what are we talking about at all, right? So if you zoom out way out, what you will see is that the matter of the universe is in these things called galaxies, right? And then between them is just pretty much empty space with, like, you know, atoms that are so dilute, right? Incredibly dilute. Not really necessarily atoms, but matter particles, really dilute. Now, so we consider the galaxy to be the basic building block of the universe, in much the same way that the cell is the basic building block of your human body, okay? Now, here's the thing. Let's take that analogy seriously. Shrink yourself down so that a cell inside of a living organism is as big to you as a galaxy is to us, all right? If you do that, and I've run the numbers, that means that your entire universe would be like 10 meters, right? Your entire observable universe would be like 10 meters. So if you're inside of an elephant and you're trying to understand the universe that you're living in, and you're looking around and you're going, just like we do, oh, there's a spiral galaxy, there's the elliptical galaxy, oh, this galaxy has that much dark matter. But because you're inside of an elephant, you're saying, oh, there's a muscle cell, there's a blood cell, there's a bone cell, right? Do you have any idea what an elephant is?
Good point.
Or the world that elephant is embedded in?
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and the world that world is embedded, it's like that could be how we're studying the universe, right? And so these are like I try to like think of it as what do we know that ain't so, right? Those are the type of things that get you.
I love
So
that
that's
analogy.
yeah,
I love that
yeah,
analogy because when you put it into that perspective in that manner, perhaps for the people who tend to think very small, very narrow, it gives them a bigger picture of, well, you're only seeing within the context of, where you are, what's around you, but what's around you, and so on.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you quoted Plato in the beginning. It's like the allegory of the cave, right? Where you live in this or the world of forms. And the reality of cognitive science is that even the world that we construct based on actual measurements and observations of the universe in which we're embedded, it's still itself a construction, right? It's still itself a construction. So this whole notion of getting the truth, I guess it's more like, getting to truth under a criterion for truth. And the scientific method is we accept as true that which is observed to be true. But you always have to have your measurement uncertainties and errors floated along with whatever it is you observe and measure, right? And the thing about that is that we can all go and observe it and measure it. So even though it's a construction, it's a construction we can all agree upon.
I love it because, again, years back when I started to realize, was there really an ultimate truth? Or is everything just simply true according to, where we are at that moment? And does it all just become a launching pad if we allow ourselves to not get comfortable with a conclusion, which is why science is, it's always changing, new discoveries. 100 years from now, what right in this moment becomes something more. So I think these are perspectives that are so necessary in terms of our growth as human beings, to realize that maybe there is no finality. We're only seeing the construct
Absolutely
where we are. Yeah.
Yeah. There's only evolution. There's only evolution and change. There is no, one of the things, there's a lot of common wisdom that's not very wise, right? Like one of them is people don't change, right? Like in my observation, everybody changes. And typically I find people change for the better when they do change, right? We age, we were fools when we were young. We were we was on some ignorant stuff, right? And then they become calm and, we get better as we age. And that whole thing about expansion is absolutely, absolutely true. One of the things that I think is very important, there's a lesson in the history of astronomy that is I like to share. And that is, it has to do with how knowledge was gained and passed on through history, okay? So we have this model that we teach in the universities about, where knowledge came from. And it starts with the Greeks, right? And then, you fast forward in astronomy, you start with the Greeks, you go to Ptolemy, and then you fast forward to Copernicus, right? And I asked myself, what happened before the Greeks and what happened between Ptolemy and Copernicus? And I found this amazing, crazy story that I felt was the best story never told. And this is a part of that story. So basically the way the story goes is the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians establish a lot of what is to become astronomy, right? We get from them our, the measurement of the natural cycles of the Earth's spin axis, the cycles of the moon, the time it takes the Earth to go around the sun, the way the Earth wobbles. So anyway, what ends up happening is you have the rise of empires, Persians, and so the knowledge that was in Mesopotamia and Egypt was lost and was preserved in the Hindu civilization, right? And they have their golden era in the Gupta dynasty. But then eventually you have the rise of the Muslim civilizations. And what happens is all of these ancient works of the Greek philosophers, the Mesopotamians, they preserve these materials and learn them. So when the the capital of the Muslim Empire was in Babylon, the Abbasid Caliph. There was this one named Al-Mansur who had this Hindu guy named Manka in his court. And Manka had all this knowledge about the sun and sky and the stars. And he's like, how do you know this stuff? And he shared with them all of these ancient works. And what happened is that they realized, Al-Mansur realized that they were too insular, that what they needed was all the compiled knowledge of all humanity, right? Don't stay within yourself, but really go out and get everything that everyone else has and make it your own, right? They founded the House of Wisdom, which eventually leads us to our modern world, right? And so what you're talking about, you know, that expanding beyond your perimeter, that's exactly what a people need if they're going to stay relevant and survive.
Absolutely. And I think the reason for people not expanding in that manner, I'm not saying everybody, is that there's something comforting about what they believe to be the known. There is absolute discomfort in the unknown. And so we get really fixed. We will go to war about a fixed idea, you know, in personal wars, you know, with one another. But the idea of something very fixed and final, and I think a lot of people are still looking for that. They're waiting for that final, oh yeah, that's what reality is. That's what it is. And I think that's part of the growth that has to happen in nature. Nature wants to continue to well, I don't even know if I can say nature wants to continue to expand, because I think that creation is what it is. It is us, I believe, that is coming into interaction with what's already there at different points. Does that make sense?
Well, we are it, right? We are
absolutely it. All day long.
You know, yes, in a way, you know, life is geology. You know, humans are life, right? This is a physical chemical process that happens due to the interactions of solids and liquids and the input of energy, right? And that's how life goes on. And really, you know, we're just like a multicellular version of single cell things in a way. If you study them and look at how they both work, you're like,
exactly.
But you know, we are relevant to ourselves, right? We don't have to be the centers of the universe created for us and all of this to value ourselves as if we are our gods, or, you know, however you would put it, right? We are relevant to ourselves. So, you know, I take these double perspectives quite often in life. Like, one perspective I have is time. So sometimes, you know, most of my life I live in the now, but then there are certain times where I take a perspective of 100 million years from now. And I'm like, what does it matter? You know, 100 million years from now, you know, and it, you know, that's what there's no need for embarrassment. There's no need to hold back. You know, it's 100 million years from now, I'm already dead, you know. And, you know, I forgot where I was going with that. I was going to do the same thing with place.
You're talking about time. You're talking about time.
Yeah, I was talking about time.
But
but it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of, you know, one of the things I realize about myself, right? You know, you talk about the expansion zone. It's about self and self-improvement, or however you define it. But, you know, my biggest challenge in my life was myself, right? Getting over myself. And when I talk about, you know, in my book, my unlikely journey from the streets to the stars, you know, I wasn't just physically on the streets, you know, I was mentally, the streets was in me, right? And how I thought of myself and how I identified.
But would you say all the things that you have experienced, like you just mentioned, the streets, you know, were also in you, and the other way around too. But do you see how all of that brought you to this moment? Do you see how all of those experiences, you know, brought you, for lack of a better word, then, you know, greatness, great evolution, internal evolution?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? As I look around the planet, I see that is a characteristic of humanity. Right?
Period.
Humans are dope. Yeah, and when you put humans under stress, right, that's when you have the greatest art, and that's where your prophets show up, and that sort of thing, right? I am a human, so I'm capable of thriving or rising to the challenge and being triumphant in hard times, right? And that's what humans do over and over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's in all of us.
Ability to survive. I think that's,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that it comes from, our ability to survive. Human beings are
Yeah.
very good at surviving because we're wired for survival at all costs. Whatever that may look like for an individual, we've all had that moment of dire survival.
It even goes beyond that to be here to even have this conversation, because in biology, there is what is known as a rule of two. So in most systems, they're in a steady state for the most part. The rate of, death is the same as the rate of birth. You're just replacing. But, animals are often born in many more than one or two at a time, right? And so what that means is that for every life form that has ever come into existence, only this tiny fraction survives to be old enough to reproduce, a tiny, tiny fraction. So to be here to even hold the conversation means you're so super resilient dope on the planet-wide scale, right? That you've made it through, if you look at our geology of Earth, and one of the things about being a physicist and a scientist is that you have these numbers in your head that you can attach to everything. So you can have a visualization of time and space, right? You can, I know the relative size of the nuclei in my body and the atom, so I can picture it, or the relative distance between the Earth and the moon, so you can kind of see the sky in 3D, right? Well, when you look at geological time and the history of life in that way, and you look at the fact that you exist, it is just like,
It's mind-blowing.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, and excuse me, from where I sit, what I found is over the years, as I dug in deeper into wanting to understand all of this, I just felt like I started to fall in love with the idea of reality. You start to get this incredible love because you start to see something much more than maybe what we've been taught, we've been programmed with. You see this bigger picture that is fascinating. So I completely.
Well, where are you going to get it? That's the question, right? You talk about where we're going to be taught. So, one of the things that I think is, our society and many others, they're hierarchical. And we are a species for which knowledge is critically important to your economic success, okay? And knowledge is proprietary. So the people that are getting this knowledge, when you go to school and you have a mathematics teacher teaching you mathematics, or a chemistry teacher, biology teacher, the probability that they worked as a professional mathematician or a high level, it exists in the school system, but chances are they did not. And so what are they teaching for? If you don't know, like when you go get a coach in our school systems, chances are they probably played sports at a high level. They probably, getting a Division I athlete as your high school coach is not that hard of a thing to accomplish, right? But getting a professional scientist as your science teacher is incredibly rare. So for those, you have to have like an apprenticeship with a guru, and we call that graduate school, right? If you want to understand the physical world reality that we exist in at that super deep level. And I think there's something wrong with that. I think there's a basic level at which everybody, should, but how we get there is the question.
Yeah, absolutely. The necessity of being exposed to that kind of information, I think it would make a world of difference in terms of, I think, how we relate to one another. There's so many things in terms of giving up our own power to other people. It's just a lot. But I'm going to stick a pin in that point right there. And I think we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I'd like to pick up on understanding a little bit more about what that means when you say hacking the stars, since we mentioned it in the title. We want to talk about that. But stay tuned and we'll be right back after this brief message. And we are back. We're coming to you from KPFK 90.7 FM in Southern California and streaming live at kpfk.org. You are listening to The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. Of course, that's me. And we are speaking with scientist Hakeem Oluseyi. I think I said it right this time. I've worked really hard at saying that his name. So anyway, all right. So we are back. So let's talk about this idea then of what that looks like, and even a little bit of information there on how light comes into play with all of this.
Yeah, so I started my professional research career studying our nearest star, the sun. My PhD advisor was a gentleman named Arthur Bertram Cuthbert Walker, Jr., who was in the first 3 African Americans to go into professional astronomy and astrophysics. So we flew rockets, and Art and our team pioneered the technology that gives you these pictures of the sun you get, where you see the sun at like 1 million degrees, 1.5 million, and they're colorful, and there's all these plasma loops on them. Okay. Now, the fact that that plasma exists was a problem for science, because the surface of the sun is like around 6,000 degrees Kelvin. And that plasma that exists above it in what we call its atmosphere or its corona is 1 million degrees. So how can a 6,000 degree surface have something 1 million degrees, right? You get cooler as you move away from the surface, not hotter, right? So that was known as a coronal heating problem. And so what that required of me, the physics that I was required to learn, is understanding how light and matter interact, okay? So the matter that is present at the sun is creating light. And so at that time, I realized that there was a question. Remember, we were talking about our education system, that I feel like every kid should be asked this question in the first grade and every year. So the question we are asked, just to give you something that's similar to show you its power, is what is matter made of, right? And so the average person will correctly say atoms, okay? Now, if I ask you, where does light come from? People have no answer typically. The first thing they typically say is the sun. And then I'm like, okay, when you're in a dark room at night, there's no sun, but there is light, you know? And then they'll say, oh, energy. And I'm like, no, light possesses energy. But the answer is matter makes it. And here is the thing that allows us to do science using light. When matter makes light, the signature of what the matter is and what the matter is doing is encoded in that light, right? So you are emitting light right now, because every opaque object emits light based on its temperature, right? We've experienced this when we heat metal. At first it looks dark, and then once it starts getting hot, it starts to glow red, right? And then as it gets hotter, it goes orange, yellow, white hot, right? So if you heated it more, it would, potentially emit ultraviolet light and then X-rays. So everything basically emits light based on its temperature. And so that material on the sun being hundreds of thousands of degrees, it emits what we call extreme ultraviolet light. So I had to learn how to take light and now read it and say, okay, here's what that matter is, and here's what that matter is doing. So I did that. I got my PhD, I went into Silicon Valley, and I realized that when they are making computer chips, a lot of the processes use plasmas, which emit light. And I realized I could do the same thing there. I could just look at the light coming out of the plasma, and I could tell you what's happening in there and make sure you do it right every time, instead of checking at the end and saying, oh, it's wrong. There goes, $1 million. And so I got several patents from doing that. But then I decided to go and study dark energy and how the universe is expanding. And so what we do there is we take a type of star that explodes. And because we know how bright these stars are, we know how far away they are when we observe them, right? If you know how bright something is really, based on how bright it appears, you can tell how far away it is, because it gets dimmer the farther away it goes, right? And so if you know how far away something is, you know how long the light has been traveling to you. So you get a measurement of time, right? And the other thing is because the universe is expanding, the light gets stretched out by wavelength and shifted. So you know how much the universe has grown by the time that light left that exploding star. So by having how much the universe has grown and how long ago the light left, you can measure the size of the universe versus time. So you take a star, and instead of you studying the star to understand the star, you study the star to understand the universe, right? And so then one of my graduate students recognized that the way that the sun accelerates plasmas to create the solar wind, if we could learn to do that technologically, then we would have an ion propulsion technology that's 50 times more powerful than what we currently have. And so basically we took physics happening on the surfaces of stars and built it in the laboratory. Well, first we built it in the computer and are, building prototypes in the laboratory. So either we use the stars for their knowledge or use the knowledge we gain by studying stars to basically repurpose them for our own purpose.
Mm. So right now, with everything you've just said, right now, is there anything else that you can say in terms of maybe being closer to some new technology based on what you've just shared?
Yeah. So a lot of the things that we do are not instantly result in technologies. Okay, when you're studying, so one of the things I do is galactic archaeology, for example. So when you're studying how our galaxy formed and how the universe formed, you develop technologies to perform those studies, and sometimes you have these technological spin-offs, but that's not the why of why you're doing it. Because the big thing is that when we do this, it grows our economy and it keeps us at the forefront of innovation, right? Which further grows our economy. So we're in an innovation world. What keeps America at the forefront is the constant scientific innovation. And so to have innovative thinkers and, you don't know what's going to spring out of your lab tomorrow. So when these cats back in the early 20th century were creating quantum mechanics by thinking about how a cavity emits light, they didn't imagine cell phone, smartphones, but, that's what resulted from it. So I say that to say that, as a scientist, our money typically comes from the citizen. And so if the citizen believes that, the dollar leads directly, their investment should lead directly to technologies that you can say this dollar led there, that's a trap in thinking. And just like you need an open society to be successful, you need a scientific, innovative society to be successful.
Oh yeah, that it makes perfect sense because I can see how all that you're doing, all the research, everything that's being done in the lab, outcomes are not necessarily known, and so you end up with these amazing. Oh wow! I mean, in a way, I can compare it to cooking in a way, right? You start out thinking you're doing this thing, and then you discover, oh wow, I accidentally mixed these two things together, and then you get this amazing, product, a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
So it,
You got your chocolate and my peanut butter.
exactly.
Yeah.
Accidentally drop it in there. Yeah. Or, mixing the chili and the taco mix or whatever. And
Or that brilliant idea everyone eventually comes to, I'll put salt in my dessert. Wow, it's so much better.
it's so much better. It's true. I mean, so, sometimes it is necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. But a lot of times it's what comes out from that. Now, what I'm always fascinated about, this has nothing to do with that, but the things that we now can eat that we heard were poisonous. I'm like, who tested this stuff once upon a time, to realize, don't eat that fruit, or does somebody have to die for it? Or how did they learn how to extract, certain parts of it that you can use this part, but you can't use that part?
I bet you there's a YouTube video on exactly that. But I tell you what, I learned recently watching YouTube videos is that a lot of the things that we like that are like spicy or fermenty or something, those things are toxins, just not toxic to us. So we developed a flavor for them because we learned that that's the stuff that the bacteria has been killed off in, so it's safe to eat.
Absolutely. I mean, it's even like pepper. I mean, I know in the
Yeah,
islands,
pepper.
I'm, from Jamaica, but in the islands, I know pepper was like a big thing, but they were using
Mm.
pepper for like pork and things to kill the parasites. I mean, that was
Yeah,
really how a lot of these cultures started out with this
yeah,
pepper
interesting,
stuff.
interesting.
Yeah.
I read something similar. I don't know how true it is about tea. That how did tea get started, and it had something to do with boiling your water was better for your health. So how do we get people to boil their water so, and keep them alive? Oh, let's throw some tree leaves in it and give it some flavor.
We are fascinating as human beings. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it really is all science. And I say that we are
Hmm.
all on some level, a scientist in our own right, in our own homes, in our own experiences and experiments. And you, scientists like yourself, yes, you take the bigger picture, the bigger part of it, and then you start decoding and hacking and breaking it down. And I think this is important for people to realize, so that there isn't so much of this disconnect, but to realize that we all inside of us have this on different
Absolutely.
levels.
Yeah. I will even go farther to say that, a lot of it we're born with and it's kind of taken out of us in a
Yes,
way.
yes,
And I say that in the way that, for example, mathematics, we're all born knowing the exact mathematics that we need for STEM, what's called science, technology, engineering, and math. But it's kind of redirected and taken out of us, and then they try to reintroduce it in high school after messing you up already, and then everybody's like, "Oh, I hate math." So I have some ideas for that one. When you recognize a problem, recognize a solution, it's one thing. Getting it implemented is another.
there's
Even
a
inventions. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you said even what?
Even inventions.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes you can invent something that has a clear cut purpose, but it just doesn't get attention, and nobody uses it. And then later somebody finds out, oh, here you go.
And then
And
suddenly,
it
yeah,
takes
years
off.
later, it's
Uh,
big. But there's a tribe, I don't remember the name of the tribe now, but I think they're a tribe in is it Brazil,
hmm,
that they didn't use, they had no number system. Like they didn't use
hmm,
a map. I have to remember the name of the tribe. A really
interesting.
fascinating group though, but they didn't use a number system. They don't say, there's two things here or three or four. It's anyway, it's really interesting. And it was
So,
a person that what do you call it, a missionary that had gone
uh,
there to try to
hmm,
convert the people
oh
to
boy.
Christianity, but instead, after many years, they converted him away from.
Wow.
So
You never hear that happening.
well, they
It's
said
not a,
Jesus. They're like, "Do you know this Jesus personally?" And he said,
yeah.
"No." Did your daddy know? Did your father know Jesus? He said, "No." Then please stop telling us about Jesus.
Oh man.
I have to send you that
So they
video.
were scientists,
Yeah.
basically, right? If you have not observed, so basically what they're saying is, and this is one of my pet peeves, is the difference between knowing something and believing something.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of people, what really gets me is when journalists ask some decision maker, "Do you believe such and such?" I'm like, who cares if you believe it or not, right? I want to know what you know and what is the uncertainty on that. And it makes it difficult for me to be a citizen because, there are certain powers and authority that say this is the case. And I'm like, okay, show me. And my colleagues, you can't tell your colleagues something in physics. Once you show them, they're like, yeah, whatever, you made a mistake somewhere. I can't find it, but I know you're an idiot and it's there, right? You have to, a decade later, finally, like, oh, okay, your your measurement is okay,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's
it
fun.
doesn't, yeah, yeah.
That's
So
fun.
now I'm supposed to just take your word for it, like,
Yeah.
yeah, this person did this, so we have to do this. I'm like,
Wow. Yeah, but you're
do a
right.
little
And
more,
that's what they
yeah.
had to, they were that tribe. They were definitely scientists because they only dealt with the know, like if you know something. They needed, it couldn't be like 4, 5, 10, 2,000 people behind of you hearing that this is what things are. They needed, did you know this person? Did you know? So I think that's definitely interesting. So I think we should talk about a little bit about the book, but I also want to talk to you about the wonderful documentaries that I've seen on, I think it's the Discovery Channel, where you do a wonderful job along with all the other wonderful scientists.
Oh, thank you so much. Believe it or not, they're all related, and they're all related to my story as an educator. So just so everybody knows what the latest and greatest is, currently showing on Science Channel is my show that I'm with Michelle Thaler, Bill Plate, several others, James Bullock.
Now, is it a
And that's
series?
called,
Is it a
it's
series?
a series.
Okay.
It's called How the Universe Works.
Mhm.
Yes. So the current season debuts on Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. So by the time your audience sees this, it should be out and about. I also am in a Netflix series that's coming out hopefully this summer. It's called Baking Impossible. That's going to be really cool. And I have my memoir coming out on June 15th called A Quantum Life, My Unlikely Journey from the Street to the Stars. Now, the reason why I wrote this book is because it sort of was a responsibility of mine. So I went through my career hiding my background from my colleagues. So I grew up in a family where there was no education heritage, but there was a lot of crime heritage. And so I started, my cousins were members of the Crips gang from a very young age. My first cousins, the males, and two of the three went to prison. And my father, he had a large business that included imports from other countries. And I was incorporated into my father's business from the age of 9. And by the time I was 14, I had my own business throughout high school. I went to the military, came back to college, had my own business. And things went very dark in my life, right? And so I was faced with a decision to live or die. And I chose life. And I chose education as my pathway, right, in science. That was one of my loves, education and music. But while I was getting my education, as a graduate student in physics, I had to teach classes. And, it was a requirement, because you may be a professor someday, right? And so I was teaching observational astronomy up at the observatory. And I was one of 4 graduate students. So each one of us had one night. And as the years went on, suddenly all the students were coming into my night. And I'm like, what is going on? And everybody was saying, oh, the rumor is, Hakeem, that you give everybody an easy A. But it turned out that none of us who ran the observatory did the grading. The professor who did the lecture is who did the grading. My students were just doing better. And so after graduate school, I went into Silicon Valley, but I wanted to come back to academia. So I taught a class at night at Foothill College up in the Bay. And the same thing was happening. Students, they take my class, my intro to astronomy class, and they'd come back and they're like, yo, I took your class and now I realize that I can do science and it's cool. And so now I'm going to school full time. And then the same thing happened when I got on television, right? People stopped me in the mall and they're like, yo, I can tell they're from a community just like mine. And just so you know, my father dropped out of school when he was 9 years old. And my mother dropped out of school when she was 16, pregnant with my older sister. Just like her mother did, and just like my older sister did, right? So and so, I know people from my, community when I meet them, and they're like, yo, man, I didn't realize it was this cool. And so I figured that what everybody was saying to me was, Hakeem, I thought I was dumb until I saw you. So, like, if he can do it, yeah. But even though this was happening, I was keeping my background secret. When I left the hood, I left and went directly to Stanford University, right? And so I didn't feel, I don't think I'll share this part of my background.
At least not yet.
And it was not yet, exactly. And it took over 20 years. And what happened is I became a TED Fellow. And the writer of the TED blogs, a woman named Karen Ang, lives in London. She had seen my application. She goes, Hakeem, tell me about yourself. And I started telling her about my research. She's like, no, not that. The other stuff.
The real meaty stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I gave her like a glimpse, and she wrote this article called Rise of a Gangster Nerd. And I was like, oh my goodness. No, no, no. You know, I'm like, what? If you were pregnant, would you go to the gangster obstetrician? No, you wouldn't do that. So who's going to hire the gangster nerd?
Oh my God.
A year later, this other magazine, Ozzy, does an article called The Gangster Physicist. And so I'm like, oh man.
It's like
And
this
then the next
gangster
year,
thing is
I get a
following
call.
me.
I know, right? That's my past, right? And so then what happens is I get a call, and they say, we want you to give a talk in this prison, Hakeem. And I'm like, I don't think so. And then they're like, the prisoners specially requested you. I'm like, that's supposed to make it attractive? Like, why? Why do they think I'm cute? What's going on here? I don't. So they're like, then the next time they call, they're like, well, let's tell you who else is going to be speaking. Richard Branson. I'm like, I'm in.
You're like,
So-
I'm in.
Yeah. So I show up at the prison, and of course, everybody has an expectation for what the astrophysicist is going to be like. And I run into the Jabberwockies. You know the Jabberwockies?
No.
Oh, the dance crew that wears the masks. They won season 1 of America's Best
okay.
Dance Crew.
Okay.
Yeah. So I
Oh, you
recognized
ran into them, you said?
and- yeah, because they were speaking as well, right? They were
Okay.
performing. Everybody,
Right, right.
it was a star-studded type event, right?
Mm.
What's his name was there? Hill Harper was
Oh,
there.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which was crazy because his grandmother graduated from my Mississippi College, Tougaloo College.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
she and I got to chatting, and he was like, "Oh man, my grandma." So anyway, after I speak, you know, I was the second. It was crazy. It was like Richard Branson, Jabberwockies, me. I was like, "Ooh." Shouldn't I have been the opening act here? But they wanted me to talk about infinity. That's what they asked. In 3 minutes, tell us what infinity is. Okay.
Mhm.
And so we were there for another, 8-10 hours that day. It was a long day, like 10,
Wow.
12-hour day. I don't know. Yeah. And so there was an area of the prison in which we could interact with the prisoners. And as I was walking around, the prisoners were recognizing me on sight, but they weren't saying, "Oh, it's Hakeem Oluseyi." They were like, "Yo, the gangster physicist." And they started asking me questions
Right.
about the universe, astronomy, and physics, right? And so at that point, I was like, you know what? If I have this power, I wouldn't be where I was if people didn't show up for me. So I had already been showing up for kids. And I realized, you know what, it's bigger than just the kids. Because, before the kids step foot in school, they're home with the adults anyway, right?
Right.
So we have to do something to educate everybody. And I also realized how inspirational people were finding my story. And so at that point, I just needed a literary agent who I could believe in. And I found one. And it's been a match made in heaven. So the book is coming out. And then I went and got a movie deal. And
Nice.
it was a joint movie deal with working title and Chadwick Boseman and Logan Coles. So Chadwick championed the project, and in the fall of 2018, Universal picked it up immediately because he so strongly championed it.
Wow.
And so I'm forever indebted in his gratitude. Yeah. So we pinned it.
That is incredible. That's so awesome because your
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
can bring so much inspiration. I would say particularly now, but actually at any time, because people have always been going through stuff in their lives, in neighborhoods,
Oh,
in
absolutely.
impoverished
Absolutely.
communities, and in lacking communities. And so I think it's going to be good. And I'm glad that you were able to move past that, because I get it. There's like a little bit of shame. Let's just keep that back there, because you're worried that, am I going to be respected in the same manner? All of those things. But you've established your name now. You've established a name for yourself, who you are, and you own your past. That's what made you who you are. Today, your entire past.
Yeah.
So
but the thing is, I had no choice but to be completely raw and open with it. Is the thing. So it's still a bit scary.
you were forced to in a way. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't write it any other way. I could not. If I did it any other way, it would have been inauthentic. And so I had to like just put my failings out there. And here I am, a completely flawed guy who had a lot to get over. And here's my journey of how I got to be, to start that process, really. You know, it's never complete, right?
Right. We're always, again, it's the expanding thing, but you can only expand. The more you clear is the more you can expand. The more you can see of yourself, the more you can expand. And, you know, my experience is the more you can own your whole story, it's just easier. You know, so
you know, it's interesting because you can remove 1 billion veils and slay 1 billion demons, and there's still veils and demons.
Oh, I mean, it's just layers and layers of it. I mean, of course, that's a whole other story, but where those layers come from, you know, we're talking generational layers, we're talking DNA information. There's, you know, just a lot. But to begin, though, even be in that awareness makes all the difference in the world, because at least you can begin. But if you are completely oblivious and blocked, there's not much. You're stuck. You know, you're stuck. So tell us real quickly, we've got like maybe 2 minutes left. The children's book, which I'm really interested in. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So Spaceopedia was written a decade ago. So a lot has changed in astronomy and space science since then. So I don't want to really promote it as the latest and greatest, because I want you all to have the latest and greatest.
Okay.
So it was done in collaboration with Discovery and Time Life Books, which is interesting because I read a lot of Time Life books as a kid based on the stuff I was interested in. So it's like we came in full circle. But, you know, on Discovery Networks, how the universe works is, you know, it's done at a pretty high, but yet completely understandable level.
Okay.
Right. It's a wonderful, wonderful show. So definitely tune into how the universe works if you're interested in it. Everybody has a different style of presentation, and none of us are stuffy, right? The production company did a great job with the casting, right? Michelle is so warm.
Right.
Phil is hilarious. You know,
that's the feeling you get when you're watching it.
Yeah.
That's the feeling you get. Yeah. And I was just flipping channels at actually one day, and I happened to flip there, and whatever they were talking about, I don't remember who was talking, but whatever was being talked about just grabbed my attention, and I started watching it, ended up watching the whole thing. But I think all of it is like that. You just you hear one thing, any part of it actually, and it's engaging.
You know what? Because it's not about the persons, it's about the universe. And the universe is so dope, right? Yeah, and we're loving it. And we're just like, yo, check this out, right? And we're just the messengers. It's the universe is the star of the show.
Absolutely. So when is the book coming out now? When
June 15th.
June 15th. Okay. All right. So we'll
it is available for pre-order everywhere. So a quantum life, my unlikely journey from the streets to the stars.
Okay, well, we're going to be chatting with him again about that, because there's a lot in there, and there's so much more that we could talk about too. And no, he thought he got crazy with this audience. This audience is they love on the edge stuff, because the host is really a little bit crazy. So no,
let's go farther next time. Yeah.
Oh no, this was pretty light, but yes, this was good.
All right.
When you come back the next time, bam, we're gonna, have you dive into more. All right. Well, I thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And we look forward to your book coming out and to having you back and to discussing so much more, as there is just endless information to be shared. All right. And thanks to...
Take care.
Thank you. And thanks to the listening audience. Thanks to our engineer. And thank you again to the guest. And also remember to visit theexpansionzone.com for the archive for this show and all the other shows that are there. Also Expansion Zone TV to watch some of the videoed interviews that are there as well. And to find out more about me and my work, visit therealsoniabarrett.com. And as always, I like to remind you to live life to its fullest and question everything. Until next time, see you then.
Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody wants